meeting is going to be nothing but wonderful and not at all hostile. So so let's very hospitable. Let's shall we crack on? I don't think we're waiting for anybody from the committee. We have Gail, we have Lynn, Sally and Lois and Stephen, and I don't think we're waiting for anybody else. So okay, is there anybody on your side, Angela, that needs to
no, looking at the names there, I don't think there is. No, I don't think there is, Karen.
Okay, so we'll make a start. So first thing on the list is apologies, and we have two, Mark and Linda James, Mark Peel, Linda James, and somebody else from you, I think, sent apologies.
Well, I think there was Superintendent Rich Ward, but
okay.
We don't have complaints on the agenda for this meeting.
That's fine. Okay. Right. Okay. Let's go on to any urgent business, anyone? We didn't have any from the committee. No. Declarations of interest, anyone? No. Minutes of the meeting on the 19th of June and the rolling action sheet. So let's just take the minutes. Now the committee has been through them, and there was one thing that we raised. Lynn, do you want to say what it was, the outstanding thing?
Yes, I mean I can take it under the rolling programme or here, perhaps here.
Take it here so we can do it correct. We'll say something in the minutes.
Okay. Well, I must preface this by giving an apology for asking for extra information at such short notice a week before the last meeting. So I do want to say that to the force, because I should have kept it to the forward programme. I will do that in future. So I just want to say that. But the information that was outstanding, that was a particular concern, I suppose, for me, was getting that snapshot of where the force was compared to the community 10 years ago, and where it is, to compare it to where it is now. And the reason for that is because it gives us a sense of how quickly or not things are changing. And that's the piece of information that kind of wasn't in that report. So that's why I was so keen to get that information, but I totally understand if it's not available, or if it is available, I would really like to see it.
Okay, thank you. And we've put that on the rolling actions sheet to be updated. Thank you. So there was nothing else on the minutes, so I'm going to agree them as a correct record, and there were no other matters arising apart from what was on the rolling thingy. So we'll have a look at the rolling thingy now, the rolling action sheet. And Angela, if you wouldn't mind just whizzing us through that.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll go straight to action 6, Chair, which is dip sampling. And as you know, we've cancelled the dip sampling session before this meeting. We will, however, look to put arrangements in place before the next meeting. I think if everything crossed and no more actions on COVID, we might be able to do that.
Angela,
yeah.
Can I I'd seen something that had come in from Unison. You know, I'm very supportive of this, but I thought I saw something come into yourself from Unison saying they're not supportive of it and they want the grievances to stay separate.
I'm
fairly certain I've seen something that Chris Hanrahan has formally written into. I thought he'd written into yourself to say that actually, in terms of why I'm supportive of the notion behind dip sampling grievances, due to the confidential nature of it, they wanted the grievance element to be taken out. It's worth checking.
Okay, I'm sorry, Rob. If I have, I've got no memory of it. We'll certainly look at that. I'll touch base with Chris. It is in the terms of reference for the committee now that they will do that. So I will have to backtrack and find out what that's about.
I mean, Lynn, I don't know if you can help with that, but I think they've got quite a strong position on it, albeit that we would like to see it happen. I think they're not supportive at all.
Yeah, Rob, they're not. They're totally opposed to it, because in their view, it's an employment issue between the employer and the individual, and they're guaranteed confidentiality. And there is a real concern about breaking that confidentiality, even if you can redact the information, and so they will absolutely not support it. And I've got a feeling the Federation might have the same view, but I've not heard that confirmed.
Okay.
So, I mean, it would be good if you could just do a bit of a background for us, Angela, to find out a bit more about it, and then perhaps we should bring it back to the next committee meeting, because it would be good just to, I mean, there may be other ways that we can do it by looking at data rather than individual cases, and so we can, I mean, certainly supportive of, you know, doing our best to make sure that employees are protected. So I think it'd be good just to get a bit more information and then take it from there.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Sorry, Angela. Yeah, we can certainly provide data of statistics, how many are resolved, all of that. There is no issue with that. There is just an absolute concern around redacting information of current employees.
Okay.
That's fine. I'll take that outside of here and come back.
And we guarantee confidentiality. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll move on to action 8, and that was stop and search. Next time we have that on the agenda, the idea was that we would invite a member of the coercive powers group, which we haven't got there yet. Item 11, that was for the chair and Dr. Peel to provide feedback on stats and data that were provided within the promotion process report. I think that report is on a rolling action plan on the forward plan. So when we come to that stage, we'll have a meeting and be clear on what sort of data you would like and how you would like that presented. Moving on to action 18, actually looking at that, the annual report is done and finalised, but this action was for you to meet with the chief and the PCC to feedback on your work over the year. And I don't think that's been done, Chair, unless you tell me a date's been arranged.
No, it hasn't.
Okay, that's outstanding then.
Yeah.
Number 19 on the action sheet, about visuals mentioned in the appendix, which was videos. We are looking to include that in a morning session. So that's outstanding. Action 20. And I have contacted Julia. I don't know whether she's around this week, Rob, or not, but
no, she's been in, Angela. So
oh, okay. Well, I haven't.
She's not mentioned it, but I'm looking at that, and obviously I can see the discussion, and obviously I know that Chris is on the call as well. So there's quite a lot that we're doing around social media and digital contact. So I think I'll pick it up with her outside of the meeting.
Okay. 21, action 21, and I know that it was about committee members contacting to see if they were interested in assisting with the communication with harder to reach groups, and I think that's yourself, Chair, and Linda James, who have stepped forward to do that. So I think that action now can be discharged. Action 22, I've asked Julia, a chaser for the service specification document. Haven't received that to date. 23, I mean, Lynn has already referred to this, and certainly we would be clear for a future report the areas to cover, but I'll perhaps speak to Lynn. I know you're on the call outside of the meeting if there's anything to hand in the meantime. And number 24 is ongoing. I mean, you've already referred to it, Rob. I think we will be having a report in future.
Bring COVID back as a theme, and then deal with some of the ethical issues that have come up. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that'll be interesting because we've got HMIC also doing a thematic on that, and it could probably all link in together.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Angela. So the next item is the appointment of deputy chair. We had a bit of a discussion in our pre-meet, Rob. So what we've agreed. Do I need to do the process again, Angela, or can I just report on what we've agreed?
I think there should be a nomination and a seconder for whoever the person is.
All right. Chair, thank you. So can I invite nominations along the lines we discussed, unless anyone's changed their mind?
Can I nominate Dr. Mark Peel?
Thank you. And do I have a seconder for that? I'll second if no one else does. And is there any other nominations? So Dr. Mark Peel is unanimously elected as deputy chair, unless he doesn't want to do it. But we know that he's indicated previously that he would be interested. Thank you, Lynn. Okay.
Thank you.
So we move on to the terms of reference of the committee, and we had a couple of comments on this, did we? Yeah. So does anybody want to kick off on this? Anybody? Grievances, as you said, Angela, are on there. Might need to review that when we know a bit more. And we wanted to, on page B7, where it says, sorry, there's 2 points, one on B6 and one on B7. I'll say the one on B7, then I'm going to ask Lynn to raise the one on B6. So on B7, it was just the wording of to review the progress of live complaint cases or misconduct investigations, including appeals that cause or are likely to cause particular community concern. And as we've discovered, really, we're not supposed to be looking at live complaint cases. So we just need the wording to change there. So it's only reviewing cases where they're likely to cause particular concern, not generally. And then, Lynn, would you say about B6, please?
Oh yes, on B6, where it says to receive feedback on formal inspection of the force from HMIC, etc. We just had a discussion earlier about the fact that that needs to go on the forward planning, and we didn't think that we had received any feedback previously, but as Angela explained, there hadn't been inspections recently. So yeah, so it's just to get that on the forward planning.
Yeah, thank you. Was that everything we had in the terms of reference? Yes, okay. So we shall move on to the schedule of meeting dates. And thank you, Angela, or whoever put that together. That's all fine. Anybody who's got a comment, please say so. The only comment I had was that I know that I won't be available for the 26th of March 2021. So yeah, so Mark may have to chair that one. Okay. Is that all agreed? Yes. Forward work plan for the committee. So a few comments here. I'll bring Gail in first. Gail, do you want to say what you were saying previously?
Yeah, I was mentioning earlier on that I think I'd like to see something around mental health and the force's response to any issues that they feel are arising with regards to suspects with regards to the mental health element. Yeah,
thank you. Any other? I've got the ones that I was going to raise, but Lynn, Stephen or Lois, anything else?
Yes, there were a couple of things from our terms of reference. One was PCC complaints, something we hadn't looked at. The other was review of vetting undertaken. That's under the people section. So those two things haven't come up yet. And in terms of forward planning on other issues, one of the things we were thinking about was about force internal complaints. Not formal grievances or anything like that, but just sort of taking the temperature of what staff are not happy about, or so that was one. Or do you think that's going to fall into confidentiality issues?
Can I offer a view on the latter bit?
You can.
Yeah, I think what we're doing. So we've got quite an ambitious programme of workforce engagement. And I think from that workforce engagement, we're picking up a lot of the themes, and so I think it's slightly different to the grievance. So with the grievance, it's about particular individuals that have gone through a formal process. I think picking up on the workforce mood, the themes, and being able to see what we're doing and how we're doing that feedback loop would be quite a positive addition. So I can't see a problem with that at all in terms of, because one of the things we also want to deliver by March next year is an internal workforce strategic assessment that will bring all our people related data, all of the engagement, put it into a framework, and then use that as part of our corporate planning cycle that will drive through policy changes, etc. So I think that's actually a really useful one that I would probably say, if we aim for March next year, we should have got that framework in and have a product to show you.
That's great.
That's
And can I just add the other one, Karen?
Yes.
The other one was something around the legacy of all these experienced officers who will be leaving the force in the next couple of years that you mentioned, obviously, in your report, Rob. And we not thinking not just about exit interviews, but about all the other things that could be put in place to capture that. And that would be an area that would be of interest as well.
Yeah.
Angela, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just sorry, and I'm sorry if I didn't pick this up earlier, Lynn. The first thing you mentioned there was PCC complaints. Did you mean complaints against the PCC?
Well, funny enough, I wondered that even as I was saying it, because in the terms of reference, I wasn't quite clear which it was, but given our conversation this morning, obviously you're going to be handling complaints in a different way, but also there may very well be complaints against the PCC, and I didn't know if that was something you would want us to have an overview of.
Okay, if I can, Chair, through you, any complaints that we receive against the Police and Crime Commissioner are not dealt with by us. They're dealt with by the host authority of the Police and Crime Panel, which is currently Leicester City Council. So we don't handle them at all. They go straight there, and an annual report goes to the panel on how many there have been and have been resolved. So then there's something we don't have any control or handle on there. If perhaps what you're referring to, Lynn, may be more the number of reviews that we are receiving as a result of the new complaints legislation, which is handled by our office. And I mentioned earlier, you know, we've got quite a few, as Mick Gamble referred to this morning. So we're running at about 26 now, but you might want to look into that area of business because this is brand new for us. As every PCC office. So we could certainly put that on the forward work plan and perhaps link it into the complaints report that you have on a regular basis. I think that might be even quarterly. It could form part of that report if you are happy with that approach.
Yeah, I think if you think it's useful for us to have some oversight there.
I think it would be, Lynn, and would we be able to see the report that goes to the panel for PCC complaints or not? We can't change it, but could we see it?
You absolutely can see it. It will go on the website. It's a public document, yes, as Rob just says. Yes, absolutely, Karen, I can make sure you get copies of that.
Thank you. So the only other comment I think there was on the forward work plan was because in our terms of reference, Rob, we've got subheadings which are leadership, people, culture. I think a couple of the things that Lynn's already said would fit very neatly under people.
Absolutely.
I think what we'd like to see is I will check the agendas going forward to see we've got those kind of things represented on our agenda, and it would be really good to see a bit more around leadership and culture and values. So that's what we've said, that we perhaps look at our agendas and just check that our terms of reference are kind of represented, because we're very interested, as you might have picked up in the people of the force and its communities.
Absolutely. I mean, Karen, I think, I mean, I don't know if it's come up when you got the input from Andy Elliott, but in terms of our blueprint programme, obviously, I'm hoping that Andy shared with you, we delivered the phase 1. We're now going into phase 2, and strategically, people is number 1 priority, because obviously, one, there's the churn, which you've alluded to. Right. Secondly, skills, attrition, opportunity around changing representation. We're developing an academy which will go live as of October, CPD. So there's a lot of work going on in that sort of people workplace development space. So I think that's actually quite a good focus in terms of going forward. I just wonder whether, when I was reflecting on the work plan going forward, it's quite big. I looked at 18, then I looked at 19, then I looked at 20, and the list just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's good. But obviously it's being able to service that and pull the reports together. So I just wonder whether, if we're adding bits in, which is positive, could we think about how we test and do that, not always reliant on formal reports. It might be visits, it might be presentations, it might be invited to a meeting to see it firsthand. I think could be creative in how we discharge that.
Of course, I think it's really important that we do that. And I think what I was suggesting anyway about the leadership, people and culture, just as a framework, it's not necessarily additional items. So the updates on blueprint will give us a lot of that anyway. The equality and diversity strategy gave us some of that. So there are things that will come up naturally from the stuff we're getting anyway. But it's just for us to check that we've got some things in there. And if there are specific new elements we want, I will discuss that with Angela to see whether we can get a specific report. But to be clear about what we want, really.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
No, that's good.
Okay, fantastic. Anything else? Lynn, you got your hand up.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Angela, you've still got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. Oh.
Okay. Great. Okay, so no other points on that. So Angela, if you and I liaise around the forward work plan, and we'll just check that we've got these. Thank you. And then we move on to the diversity and inclusion strategy. So again, we had a few comments. First of all, we really welcome it, so thank you very much. And we thought it was an amazing feat to get it onto 3 sides rather than with pictures as well. But we do have a few comments, on the whole positive. So I'm going to ask Gail for some comments, and Lynn and Stephen, if you want to come in, or Lois, do indicate. So Gail, if you want to start.
Yes, thank you. So I think maybe because the strategy is quite compact and concise, maybe there's something missing and there may be an additional document. But one of the things that I commented on was a little bit more detail about the positive action and what that meant, and the kind of, exactly what does that mean for the force, and what kind of things will you be putting in place. My second comment really was around, if you look on, what page is it?
The last
2,
one,
3, the last page, yeah. So there's a couple of bullet points there on the last section in terms of what will success look like. And I just thought it might be useful to have some targets set in there. So you talk about improved progression of staff, officers and volunteers. Do you want to put a target against that, whether it's an increase of 5, 10, 20%? And similarly, you talk about the reduction in the gender and race pay gap. I don't know the details of exactly what that is, but I didn't know if you wanted to challenge yourself with a target maybe. The third point that I wanted to make was around, and I don't know, forgive me if this has been discussed previously, but I'm aware that the NHS and particularly the local authority get involved in reverse mentoring schemes. And I didn't know if that was something that the force had already considered, or if it's something that you had in your forward plan.
Rob, do you want me to get all the points from the committee, or do you want to answer those first?
I don't mind. I don't know whether Lynn wants to come in. I mean, you saw me nodding because it's actually really quite good, because the reverse mentoring, we've got a paper coming to the next Race and Religious Board with a view of rolling that out. So that's really positive. And the target bit it's a really interesting one, Gail, because we have constantly been talking about targets. What does in year? Is it numerical? Is it percentage? I think what we're striving for is to be representative and doing everything we can to get to that. And we know that changes as the community changes. So we could probably think about how we're more explicit about what that target is, because we know our communities, 25% are from the BAME community. If you then go to the city, we know that it's more than 50%. But at the moment, the general narrative is we're going to be representative and we'll do everything we can to be.
I mean, I think, you want to give yourself challenging targets, but you want to be realistic as well. So I think picking up Lynn's point, we need to know where you are and what your starting point is. And then we need to be clear, what is realistic in the short, medium and long term, perhaps.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Rob. Can I bring Lynn in, please? Lynn Richards.
Yeah, mine's on a sort of similar theme, really. The comment was about under the equality scheme, where it says increase the confidence of members of the community to report hate crimes and incidents. And this is something we've talked about in the past, about increasing the number of communities and people within those communities who make complaints as well, because that's all really, really helpful. So it was the detail really behind that. So again, it's provoked an interest, and can we learn across, if you like.
Yeah, and we thought there might be a fuller equality scheme where it might be included, so we just thought we'd ask you about that.
You want me to come in, Rob?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, talk about the original comment that you made, Gail, around positive action. We actually have a separate positive action strategy with a comprehensive action plan. We're happy to share that with you. So, in a way, this diversity and inclusion strategy is almost like the taster for a lot
I'd be
of
really keen to see that. Thank you.
Yeah, we can absolutely circulate that to you because it goes through recruitment, retention, progression, all of the different things and the tactics that we're using to increase the representation, to become reflective of the community, as Rob has said. In terms of the race and gender pay gap, the race pay gap is, or the race pay audit that we've done is the first one we've done this year, and so we're just coming to terms with what the data is telling us. So we're not in a position yet to discuss that. And obviously the gender pay report this year, there was no compulsion to publish it, but we are actually going to publish that. So those two things are happy to come back. And our target is always to reduce that pay gap for both race and for gender, and also to extend our monitoring in the future around disability and sexual orientation. But the difficulty will be is we don't have as much monitoring data to make that effective, and therein lies one of our issues around sexual orientation monitoring and obviously disability monitoring. As Rob said, reverse monitoring, there's a programme planned around that. The issue that Lynn raised around hate crimes and incidents, we know that there is a massive underreporting, particularly with some communities, particularly amongst certain faith communities, amongst those who identify as transgender. Disabled people predominantly don't complain about hate crime, particularly those with learning disabilities, but that features all into the hate crime work that Isla Dixon does, and that's all part of the strategy that she has around trying to increase the hate crime. I think that covers it all, does it?
Apart from, is there a fuller equality scheme that we could all see, Lynn? Yes.
Yeah, it's on the website, but I can definitely get it circulated to you. Yeah, sorry, I missed that one.
Thank you. Gail, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, it was just a comment really, because obviously all of the stuff that Lynn's been talking about, I just wondered if going forward, when we have documents such as this, that by their nature has to be, strategic and quite compact and concise, could we not embed links, particularly if it's an electronic document, so we can see the kind of broader documents that sit behind it?
Yeah, no problem.
So, if there are, lots of these documents that you've made reference to, they're there. It's just that I'm not aware of it, and maybe others on the committee. So if they're embedded, or you could maybe say, if you're interested, etc. I think that would stop some of our questioning.
Yeah, it's good. Okay. So there was just one other point, Rob. When under our organisation, we felt that it would be good to include a little bit more there about the kind of leadership you are envisioning, the kind of way that you equality-proof policies, and just trying to build in a bit more about values. So it's again picking up on the kind of structural thing of the framework of leadership, culture, people, putting that into the organisation section. I mean, I don't think this is a draft. I think it's complete, but just for the future, maybe. So
no, I think it may well be. You're right. I mean, that it's not a draft, and it might be worth just sort of sharing the journey that we went through. So it started big, it then got refined, it then got out, and it's had a myriad of different people involved in providing feedback. It's really difficult to please all the different audiences. Lynn took a great role in putting it out through all our networks and getting feedback. So I do think it's probably where we are now, but actually it should be annually refreshed and reviewed. But I do think actually that bit about emphasising more around values and what we place on it and what the importance of inclusivity is for us as a force, we could strengthen that narrative in some of the other documents that has obviously just been explained to Gail. So I've written it down. It's useful feedback.
Thank you.
And could I also add, because one of the things that I've not mentioned, and Rob has been heavily involved in driving, is the diversity, equality and inclusion training framework, which in a way brings all of this together. So we're working on a range of different interventions, both webinars, front-facing, computer-based training. We went out to recruit a diversity trainer. I interviewed 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, none of the candidates were suitable, so we're going through a process of re-advertising. But it's a long-term programme where every member of staff will compulsorily have to do at least a minimum of 6 webinars, plus the NCALT training package, and plus, depending on where you are in the organisation, whether you're a family liaison officer or whether you're doing working with vulnerable victims, or whether you are a mental health first aider, you will get specialist additional training. And there's a whole piece around leadership. So it's all going to be part of the academy. It's actually quite exciting, isn't it, Rob, in terms of the training intervention we're planning?
It is, and I do feel I've driven everybody mad with the importance that I keep saying, because it's been quite complicated for people to pull together, because it does feel like equality and diversity should be a golden thread through everything and not seen as a standalone bit of training. So what the framework does is it starts right at the beginning. So as soon as people apply to the force, things like the material that goes out, the onboarding process, all of that will have start the journey of what the communities are that we serve, the importance that we place on diversity and inclusion, what they need to know, and it goes right the way through. And can I have 30 seconds to do a shameless plug, if I may, because you talked about leadership, linked to quality. A couple of things that we are looking to do again is we've got Sukesh Verma, who is coming in to work with the force on our senior leadership sort of development. So we've got an equalities framework that will go, every member of staff and every officer will go through in a period of time, and all new joiners go through that. What we're looking to do is look at that sort of inspector and above, and start to have a look at the value that we're placing on diversity and equality within that leadership framework. And Sukesh is coming in to do some rather thought-provoking and challenging sessions around the whole white privilege advantage, what it looks like. So it's building on some work that we've been doing for about 12 months around courageous conversations. So we've had a lot of really courageous conversations, but predominantly they've been with underrepresented groups. Now, I mean, Lynn's obviously gone through this journey with us. Now what we're looking to do is say, actually, we now need to start to bring in the senior leaders and get them to hear it firsthand and to challenge some of their views, some of their perspectives. So it's a shameless plug, but I actually think it's quite exciting.
Well, I think that sounds great, and it would be lovely. I think you know what I'm going to say, everybody, but I'd really like to see what that looks like, the framework of it, you know. It'd be great to see that. Maybe coming back to another meeting, it'd be good to see all the equality initiatives that are going on, including the training. We do, I mean, I do a lot in my workplace as well, so it'd be really good to nick some of your stuff.
Compare notes.
Yeah. Compare notes. Gail, you've got your hand up.
I can't remember what that one was for, Karen. I think it was a previous one. I just put something in the chat just to say that that's really good to hear, Rob. And EDI is something that I lead on in my role as well. So I'd be quite interested in nicking some of your ideas. I was particularly kind of pleased to hear about your stance with senior leaders. Because I think in the local authority, we do a lot of work in terms of, you know, staff working on the ground, staff working directly with service users, you know, recruitment and onboarding. But I think that senior leadership, cultural shift and change is really, really important. So I'm really pleased to hear what you're doing.
No, good. No, thanks, Gail. And again, it's one for the future on equalities, because I know, Karen, you'll want to move us on. But one of those which often doesn't get mentioned is around the Gypsy Roma traveller. And we've reached out as a force to the National Gypsy Roma Traveller Association, and we're inviting them in now to come and join us to look at our approach to dealing with, you know, travelling community-related crime. We feel that this, often there's a broad stereotype where actually what you're talking about is small sections of the travelling community that are involved in crime, but often disproportionately they get stereotyped. So there's a whole piece of work that we want to do there, and really, really useful conversation with them, and they're really keen to come and work with us. So again, it's one to keep an eye on, I think.
Yeah, sorry if I seemed as though I wanted to move on. I find this fascinating, and I could actually talk about it all meeting, but I think, yeah, we should move on. But just to say thank you very much for all that you're doing, Lynn and Rob and the force, I mean, on equality and diversity, and really would like to see more of it, more of what you're doing, so we can have a look at that. Okay, right. Thank you. I'm going to go on to the next paper. Okay, somebody's going. Why have you got this COVID gold meeting? So that's Lynn, is it?
Yeah. So sorry, Karen. So we've got a COVID gold, and of course with the changes to the 6+ rule, and as you may have picked up, that Oadby is obviously now in a position where they're experiencing quite a hike. There's a bit of work going into the weekend. Sure. Make sure the plans are in place. So apologies, people are stepping out for that.
That's not a problem. Thank you. So the next item is the modern day slavery and human trafficking. Yeah. And we got this paper yesterday, Rob. So so we've got a couple of comments. We might want to do something more considered at another time, because there was a paper that came with it, which is the annual report on modern slavery and police transformation. And really, it was very difficult to read, so we might need more time to kind of have a look at that.
Absolutely.
But we did have a couple of comments, so I'm going to bring Stephen in to begin with, because I know you had a couple of comments, and then Lois, if you want to.
I think I'd rather start with Gail, because the point that I made this morning is something that Gail made first, so I'd rather she made it and I supported it.
Do you mind not going against the chair's order of priorities, Stephen?
I just don't want to pass off someone else's very good views as being mine, to be honest.
Well, I should hope not, but I was going to ask you to express your own views first. But all right, Gail, would you like to come in?
No, please, Chair, I defer to you, because I can't remember what I said, if I'm honest.
Stephen, please repeat Gail's points and then attribute them.
Okay, Gail made the point, and I think it's one that I would endorse, in that we have to be careful about how we label young people, in particular in their relationship to their local communities. I mean, I'm sure that the force are aware that there's a big tension between early intervention and early intervention that actually stigmatises and therefore reinforces criminal behaviour. So if you think about it from a sort of theoretical chronological point of view, there's that tension between being able to intervene early, which is one of the central tenets of problem-oriented policing, which is what this seems to be. But when doing that with young people, we need to think about that young person's sense of self and how that sense of self is related to the way that their community relates to them. In short, there is always a risk that that young person could be stigmatised. That means that they themselves see themselves in that way, and it sort of reinforces a.
Stephen, sorry, just interrupt you for a minute, because are you talking about paper G? Because that's where Gail made those points about labelling.
Are we not on paper G yet?
No, we're on
Thank you, Chair. That's why I got a bit confused. I did make some points, but it was regards to knife crime. So the points that you were making, Steve, were the points that I was making with regards to the following paper, and that's why I didn't think I'd actually made any comments with regards to the hate crime paper. So you should have stuck to your ground, Chair, and we should have deferred to you.
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah, okay, so we're on paper F.
That Angela had this morning, my paper is messed up. Go on. So we're on F instead, aren't we? Why have I got F before G? Where is it?
Okay, F, modern day slavery, human trafficking.
Come back to me and go through my papers, please.
So let me just say a couple of the things we said was that there was mention of a toolkit and we'd like to see it. We thought that in terms of modern day slavery and human trafficking, that we really needed more mention of sexual exploitation in there and trafficking for those reasons. And there was a kind of dilemma in there, which about when a person chooses not to engage, what onus should there be on the state to intervene? And what we felt about that was that the paper itself didn't give us enough information or enough to go on. The rest of it is not really around that issue. So we were a little bit thrown by that. Lois, did you have a comment on that? And Stephen, okay. Stephen, come in.
Yeah, I've got my head on now, and I know where I am. Apologies for speaking to the wrong paper. That was entirely my fault, and I've switched off. Yeah,
that the comments were pretty good anyway. On that.
No, it was two things that I was sort of asked the force to think about. Things that we discussed this morning when we had our pre-meeting, talked about this paper. And I think the most important one is this thinking about this idea of consent, and there's an implication in the paper that that this idea of consent is binary. You either consent or you don't. But I would say that in law that is the case. You could say there's someone being coerced and therefore they don't have responsibility for their actions. And the law has to come to a yes/no answer to that. If you think about it in terms of defences of duress or other defences, but in terms of policing and particularly thinking about the public interest and what's the right thing to do, actually there is no clear boundary between consent and no consent to the circumstances. It's going to be much more nuanced and contextual in different ways, and therefore I would have hoped that the force's response to modern day slavery and human trafficking would be nuanced as well, and would, for me, the starting point should almost be a sort of victim-centered approach first. And the first thing you should be asking is this individual in this circumstance a victim first and foremost? And almost taking that as a starting point. And I'm trying to think of the second point that we discussed this morning, which is sort of...
Was it about the fact that... No, I was going to say about the living wage, and that obviously is a state or an authority issue, and that must be picked up. Was it that, Stephen, or the toolkit, or sexual exploitation?
It was also about victimless prosecutions, I think.
Yes, yeah, we talked a little bit about that, but I think I'd leave it for someone else to, so I need to talk to it.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's something going back, Karen, to the beginning, which was, when we set the work, it's been absolutely clear what we expect to be brought back in the paper, I guess, because when I think of exploitation, what's happened in this paper is they've sort of touched on that it's quite broad. They've talked about sexual exploitation. I think we're pretty good at that, actually. We've been doing that for quite a while. We've got good multi-agency arrangements. All our HMI inspections are good, if not direction of travel is excellent. The developing work for us over the last couple of years has very much been around criminal exploitation, and that dilemma we have of whether they're an offender or a victim, and the decision-making process that's gone around that. And of course, we did that big drugs operation last year, which was a big undercover. That did bring a lot of young children in that were being exploited, and we worked through a really good policy approach to that. I think what they've tried to do with this paper, if I'm honest, is to just share with you a new and emerging dilemma for us. And it's probably really surfaced on the back of COVID, because it was going on. But obviously, when you think about forced labour and exploitation, the exploitation that we've traditionally dealt with through sort of that arena has been people that are being forced to work for £15 a day, being kept in a caravan, or they're being put on a car wash, etc. What the new and emerging issue has been linked to the textile industry has very much been, you've almost got a group of people who are being exploited, but it's almost like there's a culture that they readily accept the fact they're being exploited, because they're claiming, they may be in receipt of benefits, or they may not think that they can get a job in an alternate arrangement. And some of the complexity that's wrapped around that, and the lack of powers to enable not just us, but the authority to act on that has been quite a complex journey over the last few months. So I guess that's probably why they put that in there, just to illustrate a new and emerging challenge. But I totally accept the fact that if we wanted to refine that down and bring exploitation back, we could probably pick 1 or 2 themes of it and then really have a bit more of a deep dive into it.
Thank you. That's helpful because that kind of puts it into context about why there's. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else want to comment? So it's just we'd like to have sight of the toolkit that was mentioned, so that would be good.
Okay.
And I'm going to move on to knife crime and young people, and I am going to bring Gail in.
Hi. Yeah, so it was the point really that, you know, Steve's already made. I think my view was that if we were going to be sharing information with other individuals or community groups, we just needed to be very careful about why we were doing that. I was also mindful in terms of the ages of the young people. I mean, you said in the paper that it can be as young as, you know, 12 and up to 24. So my concern was around the potential to criminalize, you know, young people who potentially could be vulnerable, and what the implications of that were. So, yeah, that was my main point.
Thank you, Gail. Lynn, did you want to add anything, or Lois, or Stephen? Where did Lois go? She just disappeared. She's left the meeting. That's interesting. Okay, so when we all looked at this paper this morning, Rob, it's about whether young people should be named to certain members of the community or members of groups, and I think all of us felt we just needed more information about that. You know, who would those community members be that the young people would be named?
Yeah.
How would that happen, and why? We needed a bit more information to give anything definitive on that, because in general the principles that Gail has just been talking about being really careful about stigmatizing young people would drive us at the moment, and so at the moment we would say no. So we'd need more information in order to consider that more deeply, and the paper didn't really go into that about reasons why. So
no, I mean, can I do you want me to just again, it might be useful just to give what I think is the context to this, and so because obviously knife crime's been hugely important to us, and you know, we've got the violent reduction network, we've reconfigured, we had a serious harm reduction unit, we've now taken it into a VCCU, which is all in there. I think when I speak to the operational staff and some of the partners involved in it, the challenge we've got is getting people to actually engage with the statutory agencies. And I think what they're aiming for here is how can the solution, a very significant part of the solution is the community getting involved in this. And it's how do you get the community get involved in it to do that supportive outreach type work, to get people to have the confidence to either step away from what activity they might be getting drawn into, or how do you sort of tailor the effort of the community in the areas where you think you're going to get the greatest gain. But there is one of the gaps in the system at the moment is so if a stabbing occurs or a really serious incident involving disorder, we can respond, and invariably what we're met with is a lack of willingness to engage in the criminal justice process. And it's not all about confidence in the police. It's largely around fear of repercussions and a lack of confidence that anything will happen when they go to court, or the fear of if they're seen to be talking to the authorities, then it'll happen again. So there's a whole perception bit, and we genuinely think that the best way to get through to that cohort is less reliance on just the statutory agencies doing their bit, but how do we involve people of influence and credibility from within the community. So I don't think it's a blanket put people's names out there, you know, almost name and shame that people are carrying a knife. I think it's far more sophisticated. It's about these are the people in our community that are concerning us. How can the community help support getting them to take a different life choice? I mean, Gail, you've got a safeguarding background, haven't you? So I'd really welcome, because this must be a dilemma that comes up from your side as well, I guess.
I was just going to add, I mean, I think obviously there's different things that you would do if there was a threat of life, or as you've mentioned, if there was a stabbing causing serious injury or even death. But I think that the points that we made when we had our pre-meeting was about, the who, what, where and when. When you say community, that's a very broad term. Who in the community is it that you're talking to? You talk about trusted people within the community, but there are as we know, there are self-elected leaders in communities who may not be, from a community perspective, someone that you would trust with that information. So I think we just really need to be a little bit more precise about who we would be sharing that information with, at what point we would escalate and share that information, and I go back to the point where if you are talking about potentially school children carrying knives, I mean, it may just be that they're going through a particularly difficult time. They may be carrying a knife because they're being bullied. It may be more appropriate to have conversations with schools and those kinds of pastoral support and safeguarding in terms of children's, as it would be then going to, a community leader in, I don't know, a community centre or a mosque or whatever. So I just think a little bit more detail. I'm not saying an absolute no, we should never ever do it, but I think from the information that we've got, I was a bit concerned and a bit nervous about exactly the detail of how that would happen.
I think
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Just checking nobody else wants to comment on that. Okay, so I will move on to paper H, which is the ethical issues of child sexual child criminal exploitation, CCE.
Yes.
Yeah. So I am going to ask Stephen and Lois to contribute to this one, if you want to. Do you want to, Stephen? Do you want to, Lois?
Happy for Lois to start.
Okay. Lois, did you want to?
Yes, sorry. Yes, my issue was just about examples, really, about exploitation. So I wondered where the Rotherham cases came into this, because it's not really referenced at all, and that would be a really useful starting point in terms of good examples of where victims were also perpetrators and they were let down by the criminal justice system, and that was highlighted in the report, which I still can't remember the name of, but it's a really important point, and it is how you engage those communities when they are victims and how you put those practices in and how they are integrated across all services. I think that was my only comment.
Yes, thank you, Lois. Stephen?
I suppose it's linked to that, and one of the things that sort of, to be fair, it's implicit in the paper, but it's definitely linked to what Lois said. So if we look at paragraph 20, it gives the key factors in deciding whether to charge, caution or conditionally caution a young person. They obviously aren't ranked. They are a list of factors, but it was interesting to me that whether it's in the welfare or the interest of the child and young person came right at the bottom of the list. When we all know that under the Children Act, the welfare of the child or young person should be a paramount consideration. And I think it is linked to what Laura said there. I would have hoped that with such vulnerable individuals that we're dealing with, that the first port of call and the first approach should be, is this person at risk? Is this person, a victim in this? And again, try to take that approach that we said about young people earlier, around it being victim-centred. Has been the sort of primary position, and I think in some senses it's a way of thinking and looking at the world. So if officers are thinking in these circumstances, the first thing is, are we going? We are looking here for victimisation, and we are looking here for the vulnerable and taking care of the vulnerable. I think that will then steer the police's and the criminal justice system's response.
Yes, and I think we looked at the other paper that was sent out, the Working Together to Safeguard Children, and we felt that there could have been some more read across, so we could have put some of that, the child-centred approach from that paper into this one. But yeah, but it didn't, to be honest, I got that yesterday and didn't read it all. So yeah, we just thought a little bit more in this paper about the child-centred approach, Rob.
Yeah, no, again, I don't know why the papers went out so late, but I think certainly if you were talking to people working in exploitation, they would definitely articulate a victim-centred approach. I guess we could be more explicit. I think this is really complex work. I really do. It's because the spectrum of what is coming through and what officers are being expected to assess. Not everybody accepting the fact that these are vulnerable people. You know, some are hugely streetwise by the time they get to 16, aren't they? And trying to navigate your way to what the truth is hugely complex. But no, I'll take that feedback on board. What do we think we would want to see back here, if anything at all, Karen?
I think we would like to see a bit of a change up of the emphasis in the paper. Yeah. To answer your own, or the question that was in the paper, not necessarily yours, Rob, but to answer that question, I think what we'd like to see is how the force would answer it if you started from a child-centred approach. And then we can assess, or not assess, but have a look at that answer. So yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, and I guess the bit that I'll share with you is obviously this particular work, exploitation. We have our force approach, but it's all managed, and we take it through what is a partnership vulnerability executive, because this is safeguarding. Yeah, so all of this is choreographed with our colleagues across local authority in a multi-agency approach. So because they're all interconnected. Of
course, yeah. Thank you. That's great for that. Okay, am I okay to move on, everybody?
Just sort of want to briefly respond to one of the things that Rob said there. You know, of course, we recognise this is an incredibly complicated area, and the other thing that we recognise as well is how you describe what you do on paper. You know, it's difficult, and therefore that nuance in terms of perspective. You know, it's good. It's good to hear you confirm that actually, you know, that the force's view is it should be victim-centred from the outset. So no, that was good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to the ethical dilemmas. And we had quite a lot of discussion about this, Rob. So I think it's fair that we should represent that discussion and replicate it for you. So scenario 1 about taking the knee, which we loved. We loved this scenario. We liked discussing it.
I think some people have really fretted over this. So I'm really interested to see what your thoughts are.
Okay. So I'm going to, Gail, you had views, Stephen, you had views, Lynn, I think you said something, and I had views. So let's start with Stephen.
I'm just taking a drink. I was assuming you're going to come to me last because you cut me first, and generally I talk too much anyway.
You've been very good this meeting, Stephen. Very good. So, all right, let me go to Gail then.
No, I will happily kick us off. No, go to Gail. Go on, rather than kick me off.
You know, I'm sitting here, and I thought you were going to come to me first, and my heart started beating because I'm very passionate about this topic, and I felt that nobody agreed with me, but I'm going to say what I feel. So when we had the discussion this morning, obviously I'd written this paper. So I'd obviously read this paper previously, and I thought I need to try and be objective, even though I'm very passionate and I feel personally affected by this, because I went on a demonstration, which I've said before. And I did actually mention at the first meeting when it was touched on this, you know, about Black Lives Matters, that I was very positive about the response of the police. The police that were at the demonstration that I went to on Victoria Park. They were there, they were present, but very much in the background. It wasn't oppressive at all. I think the other people that were there kind of welcomed their stance, and you know, the atmosphere was very good. So looking at the actual dilemma in terms of taking the knee, I tried to think about, well, what similar situation could we think about that could be viewed as political? So the things that came to my mind was things like, you know, wearing a poppy I mean, I do actually wear a poppy, but I know that, you know, other individuals find that something as a statement, as a political statement, that they choose not to do because they feel potentially it could be seen as glorifying the war. My stance on it is that actually it's not glorifying, but it's actually, you know, showing respect, or you know, just some recognition of people who have fallen in the war. Then I also thought about, similarly, you know, the minute silence. I know at the local authority, it's quite fine if people actually want to go outside of the local authority building and stand and have a minute silence and kind of physically demonstrate that they want to do that. And some people do. Some people just, you know, sit quietly by their computer and don't talk to anybody for a minute. Some people carry on their business as if it's nothing, which is perfectly fine for them to do. So in the debate and the discussion, I think my view was that actually, if a police officer wanted to take the knee and they were off duty and they wanted to participate in the demonstration, then that would be perfectly fine for them to do that. However, if they were there in a capacity of being on duty and their primary capacity was to actually, you know, police that demonstration or manage that demonstration or ensure that there was no you know, conflict with the demonstrators or with any kind of counter demonstration, then actually their primary purpose is there to make sure that there's no trouble, make sure nothing kicks off. And for me personally, it was quite a emotional thing to take the knee for 8 minutes. You know, you'd be surprised at how long 8 minutes is when you're on one knee and holding your hand up. It is quite a physically demanding thing. You know, I've just turned 50. It was quite hard work. So for a police officer doing that, and depending on who the police officer is, it may be that they also are personally affected and have that kind of emotional investment, or it could be that they're doing it to show support for you know, a community that they don't particularly, you know, explicitly belong to. So I then came to the conclusion, which everybody shot me down, which was actually, you know, if you're on duty, then perhaps it is a political stance, and your primary purpose shouldn't be to be taking the knee, but should be there. And, you know, there are other ways that you can show support or respect. So that was my view.
Thank
so I'll
you,
hand over
Gail.
to others.
I just want to say we didn't shoot you down. I think what I said was
no, sorry, I'm being flippant. I'm being flippant.
View,
I think it was an excellent.
view.
Yeah, I think it was an excellent debate, and I welcomed kind of what others had to say. I was being flippant. Sorry, Cara.
Okay, yeah, but you know, I really want to respect what you're saying. That's why, you know, I was a bit hurt by that. Stephen, do you want to come in with the a different view?
Yes, sorry, I just realised I hadn't unmuted myself. Yeah, I think I did come to a very different view. And I was, as I said this morning, you know, Gail's starting point was one that actually led me to, you know, a different view, and I was quite surprised at the end that she came to the view that she thought that this was a political stance that is in conflict with officers' roles. I think my starting point is, and I said this morning, you know, policing is political. Policing is the reproduction of social order. There is no getting away from that. Now, it might be political in a small p rather than a big P, but that doesn't mean that policing should be a free-for-all then. You know, there are definitely activities which are political, definitely with a big P, that we want to be careful about what individual officers do. But I think taking the knee is not really a political stance. Rather, it's a stance. For me, it's an empathetic stance. It's one that displays empathy around a social group's real calling out for justice. And if the police aren't about justice, you know, then what are they about? So, in that sense, I wouldn't describe it as political in the way that's in conflict with the Code of Ethics. And therefore, I think it is right under question 2 for the police to allow individual officers to make their own decision. I don't think it should be you can't do it, but I don't think it should be you have to do it. I think because it is about a display of empathy, it is about, therefore, individual officers making the call as to whether they want to do that. And in relation to the considerations, I would have thought that actually this was really good policing. If you think of policing from a public order perspective, one thing you're trying to do is to maintain order. And increasingly, we talk about public order policing as recognising the protesters' right to protest. taking the knee and displaying empathy, therefore says to the protesters, we recognise the nature of your protest. We recognise that your protest has an empirical grounding that we share, that there's a problem here that needs to be addressed, which can only be good for maintaining order, because then that reduces any potential conflict between officers and the protesters. And great message as well in terms of community relations as well. Particularly given what the nature of the Black Lives Matter campaign is, it comes from a fundamental call that policing is disproportionate upon the communities, and for officers to stand, and engage in an act that recognises that and accepts that, I think can only be a good thing. I think both from, one of the things we've talked about, and I think it was a lot before your time, Rob, one of the things we've talked about, or I have talked about in previous meetings, was is there a gap between what you are telling us as management, what you want to happen, and what frontline officers do? And one of the things that you've consistently said to us and convinced us around is that, as senior management, you take issues like disproportionality incredibly seriously. And we've been speaking about that in the meeting earlier. And one of the things I've often asked is, do frontline officers agree? And it's hard for us to know that. Individual officers taking the knee is a lovely example of actually how you've managed to inculcate a culture that this matters in your frontline officers. They are displaying that they think it matters. So for me, I think it's a fabulous thing, and I think it should be encouraged rather than one that should be seen as a problem.
Thank you. And for what it's worth, Rob, I thought some of the most positive examples of policing in the US was when officers, white and black, took the knee and showed them that they were in solidarity with their communities. And that was a signal that they would not put up with the discrimination or any kind of police brutality. And that, to me, was really, really positive. It was about protecting the community as much as it was just standing up and watching them. Protecting the community was by saying, we're here with you and we'll work with you. So on the 3 questions, we don't think it would be in conflict with the Code of Ethics. We were agreed on that. We agreed that it should be left to the individual officer, with the caveat that Gail said that there is a view that if you're on duty, that you perhaps need to be, would you be as vigilant as if you're on one knee as if you're not? So I think, one of the compromises might be to make sure that there are enough police that are not taking the knee at that point to be able to cover for you while you did. So it's a question of making sure there's some kind of mitigation for people who do want to take the knee. And if it comes up again in the future, then I think, yes, I mean, all of the things we've said, but I would say it is up to the individual officer, and I would hope that the force would back them and say, if you want to do that, it's your choice, and we will, in our operations, make sure that there is cover to make sure that we're watching and being vigilant on what else is happening. Okay,
I mean, Karen, thank you, and genuinely, it was one of those where I was really interested to see where that was going to go, because our stance, as you could probably tell, was actually, you know what, if there was I'm surprised actually. I think more people probably wanted to do it than felt comfortable that they could just get on and do it. But we made it absolutely clear, look, if you want to take the knee, you take the knee. And we know that down at the clock tower, I know that there was officers down there in uniform that did. But it was done in a way where it didn't cause any operational impact at all. So it feels like we've probably got that right, but it's good to sense check it. So no, thank you for that.
Right, great. Thank you very much. We like that one though. So bring us more like that. Okay. So we'll move on to the hospital of absconders, and I think, Gail, you did have you had some good points on this. Can I bring you in again, please?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I think when I looked at this one, I think it was about, the police really discharging their duties in terms of whether it's a hospital patient or anybody else that's vulnerable, really, and working in partnership with maybe other statutory agencies, whether it's the ambulance service or the local authority, safeguarding, etc. I think, we can't say that people in this position have just, made their decision and we're going to kind of let them get on with it, because I think there's lots of different reasons why people may, discharge themselves from hospital. I'll go back to the point of, mental health maybe playing a part in this. And I think that my bottom line was, from a safeguarding perspective, if there's a risk to life for that individual themselves, or anybody else that they may come into contact with, I think my view is it is a police responsibility to get involved.
Okay, thank you, Gail. So I've just put in the chat, I think, Lois, did you want to come in on this, or Lynn?
I think I just sort of reiterated exactly what Gail said in a different way, but I think my other point was that this scenario is something that we've heard before around varying issues to do with mental health, and whether it's actually something that agencies should be getting together and talking about whose responsibility it is, because I think at the moment what happens is it bounces around, which, it's the ambulance responsibility, it's mental health responsibility, it's the police responsibility as well, without the agencies joining up and saying, let's look at these individuals, who is the best person to respond, and maybe a multi-agency response is appropriate. But I don't think it's an ethical decision. I actually think it's a service decision.
Well, can I just come back on that one, Karen? Because actually, following on from the mental health scenarios that we've talked through before, there's been quite a lot of discussion with health and mental health colleagues, and I think we've moved in a good direction around that in terms of most appropriate agency. I guess with this one, it's where people have they've gone into A&E for whatever reason, and then they've checked out. So totally, I get Gail's point around where there's a genuine risk to life. Naturally, we would always get involved in that. I guess the dilemma then comes as to when you've then found these people, how do you then get control of them? Because obviously it's about choice. And I overlay it with, go back to the scenario of knife crime. We know that, routinely we are responding to incidents involving machete attacks, and where people have sustained injuries. They're not life-threatening, but they're serious injuries, and they're discharging themselves and then leaving the hospital. And of course, it's leaving the hospital in a predicament. It's coming across to the police. We're having to find these people. They don't want to cooperate. They don't want to get involved in it. So it is that sort of small number of people which are creating quite a bit of demand. And it's just about how we tackle that. But I guess that it was included in here for, who is there an ethical dilemma walking away from them when we've located them and they say, I'm not going back to hospital. And they don't, they're making a choice.
But that's a decision. That's a decision about capacity, isn't it? If the person has capacity, and if they haven't been deemed sectionable, then they have the capacity to make that choice.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Is that okay, Rob? Is that enough?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, thank you.
Okay. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. So the last item on the agenda is a COVID-19 update from you, Rob. Was there any? I mean, we've kind of seen the update, haven't we? Obi and Wigston in lockdown.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those, and
yeah.
I mean, obviously the COVID experience has been an interesting one, because obviously people on the panel will know that it started with health. It then got declared as a major incident, which brought it across to ourselves to chair a strategic coordinating group. I chaired that up until the end of July, where it then went back to health, because at that stage we'd gone into the Leicester lockdown. We've got a plan in place with that. We'd harmonise the challenge between a national centred sort of policy directive versus local delivery on the ground. So we worked our way through that, and then obviously it's gone across to Andy Williams now in health, who is managing the SCG. I think this is going to be the challenge for us is, I think we're not out of the woods. I sense that the volume of cases increasing. There's talk of the second wave and the modelling of what that looks like going into the winter. So I guess for us, what we're thinking is, well, there's a number of elements to it at the moment. I think we're looking at, from a public sector perspective, making sure that we create and have that resilience. It's quite worrying about the availability of testing and the testing delay, but certainly currently it's still in that sort of major incident type category, because Ope is on the increase. Leicester is stable at the moment, so it went down from over 100 down to below 50 out of 100,000. That's a stable position, but it's just how quickly this position can change. So the Ope issue, for example, we're exploring whether that's connected to one event that may have brought a lot of people together, and that could have led to a local outbreak, and it's how quickly that outbreak then goes across parts of a community. So it's going to be tricky stuff going forward, but I wonder whether it's worth COVID and the ethical dilemmas being brought back for a bit more of a discussion in the future. Would be a useful exercise. Yeah,
it'd be good, and hopefully by the time of our next meeting in December, I know I'm not even going to say it. Let's
Karen, just don't say
it. Yeah, please bring that back.
Locked down, ready for Christmas.
December or March, anyway. Yeah. So thank you for that, Rob, and thank you for all the work that you're doing on that, because it must be really difficult, as well as the routine, if policing is ever routine, that your day work and then had to have COVID layered on top. It must be really difficult. So thank you for that.
No, thank you.
So it remains for me to say, well, first of all, thank you to all of our committee members for engaging and all of your comments and reading all the papers. Angela, thank you so much for all of the admin that goes into it. And to Sally and Rob for staying with us through the meeting. I think it works really well having the ethical questions in the reports, because what it does is really focuses our attention on what's in the mind of the author. And it helps us. Sometimes we say, well, it helps us point to where we want more in the report, but that's helpful. Yeah, so yes. I think that's it's good, and thank you for suggesting that previously, Rob. That's worked really well for us. Are there any other comments from anybody? I just want to say stay safe, and don't go out if you don't need to. And yeah, it's good to see you all though.
No,
thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the meeting. Thank you.
Me too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Karen. Bye.
Everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you, Dearden.